This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
Hey, good to be back.
It is good to be back, yeah. I was telling everybody last week you were, out doing family stuff, which is, important. And, I'm a good and dutiful, boss. And, I make sure that my employees, have time to do family stuff. So,
Give me some PTO, right?
That's right. I gave you a little PTO. That's awesome. Don't do it again. So we're gonna have another lovely interview this week with one of the movers and shakers in our industry. First, I wanted to give a shout out to a gentleman by the name of Kevin. He wrote me on Twitter Monday asking about a podcast he wanted to do, which I appreciate him asking our show for feedback about how to do a podcast. Gave him some pointers. I just wanted to say hey to Kevin. He works at an ISP. He's on Twitter, so you can follow him if you follow me. And I wanted to thank
Good
Emerson.
Luck, by the way.
Sorry.
Good luck to Kevin.
Yeah.
Podcast.
I gave him some pointers like consistency is the key. Don't overcomplicate your audio setup. Don't try to do audio and video first. Try to go simple. And then I like to thank Emerson. He's also a listener to the show. He had an idea on password manager stuff where you have a password manager and it's got your big long passwords in it. But if somebody was to gain access to the password that stores all your passwords, you're kind of screwed. So what he does is he adds a phrase or a string of characters after the big long passwords that he knows, so that he doesn't have to worry about. Even if somebody does get his password locker, they still need to have an 8 or a 10 character phrase or bit that he knows. Kind of like a YubiKey, where you plug the YubiKey in and sees it as a keyboard, press the button, and you get a pre-generated key or phrase. So I thought that was pretty cool. I might actually try to start using that. It allowed me to have shorter passwords at least. I don't have to have an 85 character password to log into stuff at work. So I'm a little over paranoid.
Yeah.
So,
it's like a jerry-rigged two-factor, eh?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a poor man's two-factor. So, let's get started on our interview this week. You've heard him before. He came and talked about endpoint data, EDR, endpoint data, and Ben, what was EDR stand for again?
Endpoint detection and response.
That's it. Of course, that lovely dulcet voice you hear is Ben Johnson from Carbon Black. He's the co-founder, and you are the CTO?
Chief Security Strategist is my title.
Okay, Chief Security Strategist. Is that like, what is that, like head sales guy? Head marketing guy?
No, I don't know. We're still trying to figure that out, but it's a lot of evangelism as well as some internal roadmap and CTO-like stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of field-facing work.
No, that I mean, you are the co-founder, so you should be like the head ambassador for your company. That makes sense,
I think ambassador is a great term. Yeah.
Very nice. So, what brings you to us this week? You were talking. You wanted to talk about some things that were affecting InfoSec leadership.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me on again. Had a
Sure.
great time last time. You guys have a great, very popular, listener base and followership. And so I had random people saying, "Hey, I heard you on that podcast," and I'm like, "Wow, that was awesome."
Yeah.
You guys have a really good reach, so congratulations on that. And I had a great time and just had some things I've been talking about, writing some blogs about, but I still think we need to get more awareness around some negative forces that are making security harder than it should be.
Okay. All right. You've got 3 of them here. So, and I actually thought of something else that came up in a Twitter post from a gentleman by the name of Link State. So, we've actually talked about a couple of these. The first one you mentioned is talent deficit. Is that there's a lack of talent, or there's just a lack of people to fill jobs? What are we talking about there?
Yeah, so there's a talent deficit, and I think most people would strongly agree with that. Once in a while, people don't, and that's fine. But I would definitely disagree with them. For those of you who don't know me, I travel around for as part of my job, and I've spoken to probably 600 organizations. Just this year, I've been into Europe a few times, Middle East, Asia, all over the U.S. Right, so I get around. I talk to big and small and medium organizations, and no one has their headcount full, right? They're all looking for people. Sure, when you put out a new job rec, you get tons of applicants, tons of resumes, but it's just not what you're looking for, right? And so there's just not enough people. And the number one problem I see is that talent deficit, just simply not enough people. So I think that's the first thing we really have to think about here. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, so I've worked with Mr. Betcher, of course, at a company. A lot of what I'm seeing from that is that if it's not a lack of people in the area, it's that the job descriptions are not what they need to be, or they don't make any sense. I mean, at my current job, we were hiring for a gentleman with pen testing certification, pen testing, heavy on the pen testing. And I got in there and I looked at the job description because my boss at the time had said, hey, take a look at it. And I look at it and I'm reading this and I'm like, this is not a pen tester job description. I was like, when you hired me, I told you I didn't have an OSCP. I didn't have, GPen or whatever. I had a CISP. And he's like, yeah, well, that's enough, right? And I'm like, no. I talked a better game or something. I was able to weasel my way into the company and make you think I actually knew what I was doing. CISP is not a pen testing certificate. So I actually had to help rewrite a bunch of job descriptions that I think helped get us a better person at the company. Do you think that it has something to do with that, or do you think that there's just really a lack of, you've got 10,000 positions and only 3,000 people out there to fill them?
Yeah, and I should mention I really was excited and am excited to talk to you guys about this, because I'd love to hear, much like you're saying, your perspectives on all of this, because I know you guys have had all sorts of roles and talked to all sorts of interesting people and that kind of thing too. I think there's a shortage of just overall bodies, but then there's tons of shortages of skill. I think a lot of it too is the job descriptions are poorly written. You guys know as well as anybody, probably better than a lot of people, because of your experience, that like years of experience don't matter that much. Sure, they help. And you'd probably rather have someone with at least a few years or 5 years than maybe zero. But a lot of it's attitude and like hunger and the ability to be versatile. One minute you're looking in Splunk, the next minute you're looking at, some sort of sandbox, the next minute you're looking at threat feeds or whatever, you're fighting a fire, then you're lobbying internally, then you're writing a report, right? Mm-hmm. There's just so much that security people are doing, at least in most places. And the other thing too is I've talked to a lot of people who are now finally in InfoSec, but it took them forever to get in there, and they wanted to get in there. They were working in IT or some sort of related technical or scientific field, engineering field, et cetera, but they just couldn't figure out how to actually make the transition. And it's kind of like, until you've had that first security job on your resume, it's tough. Yeah. And so I'm interested in your perspective as well.
Well, I think you have to find security evangelists within your company, whether it be a developer or a service desk person or whatever. And you have to have a sort of a grand strategy of, okay, how am I going to tackle all these issues? Because obviously most of us have overwhelming amount of things that have to get done, and we can't do them all. So tackle some of the things that you can eventually at first push down to lower levels, so that, let's say it takes kind of near genius to figure out at first, and then you sort of automate it by documenting the processes and the procedures necessary to perform this particular task. And then you can get somebody from another group. Let's say it's your help desk personnel or whatever, to tackle, okay, I'm getting, these triggers or whatever in Splunk. I figured it out. I've kind of automated, I've correlated things in Splunk, and I've gotten it down to a science. Now let's turn it over to you guys so that I don't have to focus on those things that maybe happen 5 or 6 times a day, but it takes up some of your time. And then you start focusing on another high level task and pushing that down further in the organization. If you need to hire somebody that's a lower level security, or somebody who's interested in security but has no experience, this will get them started.
Well, I mean, okay, so that's great. You're going to deputize people from other parts of the organization. You're going to have devs who are going to do, you can, teach devs how to use Burp for fuzzing, or, whatever. So they don't have to hire, security analysts or, security testers to test software. They can only do so much. But I mean, it's good to be able to fill out those recs, but you've got people who are going to be, they don't want to do the fuzzing. So you're going to have people who do that. So I wanted to take a pen testing position because I did not come from a pen testing background, and I had interviewed with a local company up here. And obviously they didn't take me because they're a really good company. They're called Leviathan. We've had Lee Brotherston on the show. They're a really great organization, and they didn't take me because they know I'm not a pen tester. And there was a junior pen test position, which you never really hear a lot about, like a junior pen testing position. I think, and the position that I took would have given like a 50% pay cut, which for me was not possible. So I'm kind of stuck where in my current position, I would have to kind of start over from scratch at the very bottom to get into pen testing. So, I mean, we need to figure out how to create positions that would allow people to cross-train, because a senior developer is not going to want to become a security guy because he's going to end up taking a pay cut. So that restricts our talent pool for people who want to break into security, because they're going to have to take a massive pay cut at the beginning. Am I wrong in this? Because I mean, at least from my experience, that's what happened to me. I don't know if there's a way to cross train people and still allow them to do some of their job.
Yeah, I think I think from other positions, it's possible to start, getting some of the help desk guys time or something like that, and then eventually they're full time into security, and you sort of transition them that way. But when you're moving like different companies and going into a position you've never held before,
Mm-hmm.
I do think, yeah, what you're talking about is real. I think the other problem too is compensation. On the flip side, though, there's a lot of regions where compensation, and I think it's slowed down a tiny bit, the crazy increase, but for the last couple of years, it's been going up a lot, where if you bounce job to job, you're getting a pretty significant raise every time. And so there's no consistency, or there's no stability. It's like a year out, and then, you move on. And I mean, some of the compensation amounts I've heard in these various places is just outrageous.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, unless you're top tier, you can't compete to get those people. So yeah, it's all about getting the hungry people and training them. Hire for passion, train for skill, I think is an expression, and I think that's very true in security.
Yeah, and I think we probably need to get away from with the idea that you need to hit the ground running necessarily, because there's a lot of companies that's like, oh yeah, we want you to know everything under the sun, and oh yeah, there's no time to train you on anything. So you really need to know that stuff ahead of time, and that discourages people who are maybe like 90% of the way there. They may just need a couple of months to get ramped up on something, and that automatically disqualifies them from the job because they don't already know everything that's necessarily needed for the job. Which tends to discourage people and keeps them in their in their place, so to speak. Which the company that is looking for that guy who needs to be trained a little bit and may end up being more valuable and maybe more loyal in the long run by staying more than a year at that company, if you maybe throw a little training money at them to begin with.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too. I think there are ways to help here, and one thing I wanted to mention, and I'd love your guys' take on it, is a lot of the teams I see that are just doing some great stuff. There's a strong leader, and it's usually the case that, and I know no one is surprised with that statement, right? But the thing that's interesting is usually uh, when the leader leaves, they like take the people with them. No, it's not, maybe not right away or whatever, but you see like these teams that have like just created this intense loyalty, and they're very effective. And maybe it's only a few people, and it's like a 50,000 employee company, right? So quite a lot of assets to defend and surface area and all that. And then you see if you can keep that leader happy, they're going to keep their people happy, right? And so there's various ways to do that. A lot of that is not just compensation and stuff. It's like friction. Like if they have to fight for every single inch that they get, well, they're probably going to go somewhere else, right? And then training. I think you mentioned training. Yeah, send all your teams to whatever conferences they want to go to. Some cool like B-sides things, some other things, like just it doesn't just have to be like Black Hat, right? And then the other thing is look for other ways to have perks. So we're probably all sick of the term threat hunting, right? Or whatever, but let your team have some of that free time, like creative time, and say, hey, just go find something in our environment that our tools aren't catching, or go do, that's just an example, but find these other ways to like make it more exciting versus just responding to alerts all the time, or like writing RFPs and testing tools or whatever, right? So you got to start being creative and letting your team, have more fun in their jobs.
Yep.
Well, that kind of reminds me of when you talked about great leaders, and the teams follow them. I mean, most people will work for a leader. They won't work for a company. So if you have a very good company, all the perks associated with it, well known, Fortune 500, whatever it is, great company to work for, but the manager's crappy, they're not going to work there very long. But if you have like a below average company but a great manager, I mean, those people stay. It's all about results and retention, right?
Yeah.
With management, so they tend to stay with a great manager.
Well, that manager may often be a filter against the upper echelons, or he may be able to effectively discuss the issues going on with upper management to the point where they either nod blindly and let him do whatever he wants or she wants, or they implicitly trust him and they're just going to let him, they give him a bit of a leash. So yeah, if that guy leaves and that it's all going to go to pot after that, because that vacuum is there, you're going to probably jump ship with your manager if he sees any kind of skill level, or he likes the way you work, because he's going to need people at his own company where he can build his own repertoire, where he can build his stable of people. So we've talked about the talent deficit, and we're going to throw training at it, but what can InfoSec as an industry do to help fix the issue? Or is there an issue to fix? Is it just something that where we have to work inside our own companies, or is there something we can do for advocacy wise to get that fixed?
So it's a tough problem, and honestly, I don't know if you guys have ever get into like Twitter discussions, or all the listeners, or there's some way to sort of discuss this, because I'm sure we'd get 1,000 ideas, right?
Sure.
I think what it's driving automation and orchestration. It's driving MSSPs. Both of those are really exploding. But yeah, I mean, you're seeing like academies pop up that are kind of like, the coding academies, but it's like a security academy, right? You're seeing those pop up, and I believe they're having some success, but it's a relatively new field. You're seeing the government start talking about potentially subsidizing, some training, or maybe going to one of those kinds of academies or something like that. So trying to figure out if there's some sort of larger scale program. And then you're starting to see companies say that, maybe they'll in similar to what we just said, but maybe they'll actually fund you to take some classes and then they'll hire you. Like it's sort of like, hey, you'll join us, but basically you'll take these classes first. We'll pay for them, and then you'll start work, whether that's Sands or someone else. I think we need more people in the funnel, more people in the pipeline. You mentioned it earlier. We need better job requirements, job postings, because they're not right. And then really referrals, I think, are understated or undervalued. Like we all, I think, believe in referrals, but we don't go out and say, hey, I'm going to give you $10,000 or some pretty significant amount for a referral bonus, right? Because I know that if one of you guys refers your buddy, he's going to come in and be a rock star, right? You're going to refer someone that's going to maintain your reputation, that's going to do well. And then we don't have to spend all this time searching. And, it's well worth it to increase the hiring and referral bonuses. So I think there's some things we can do, but overall it's not like a single solution really can solve it.
Yeah. One other thing I would probably add to that is don't judge the applicant by how young or how old they are. And I have a friend of mine. He worked at a company for probably about 20 years before his job was basically outsourced. And, that dude would probably work 60 hours a week if he could. But because there's some kid out of college that will work for half of what he wants, they will hire the college guy. Because one, he doesn't have a family. He can work on Christmas Day if you asked him to. The gentleman who's worked 20 years at the other organization brings a lot of knowledge, but yeah, he may not be able to work Christmas. He may actually want to take a vacation or a holiday. So, you want to... I would think that in the job screening process, there should be better ways of de-anonymizing the resume picks instead of knowing... how they're doing things, blank out names and birth dates, and maybe it's just, proper resume writing too. I know that a lot of the cons recently have been doing resume writing sessions because, there's a lack of, either good resume writing, or I guess if you don't need a resume these days for if you're high enough up in the, the food chain. But I think if I'm rambling, I'm sorry, but yeah, I think you just need to not necessarily look at the outward appearance of the person and instead what skills they bring to the table.
Yeah, and I think part of it is too that companies are not necessarily in the same person, but it's maybe just within the same small team, and maybe it's the same person, that they want someone that can rip apart an unknown binary and yet give a PowerPoint presentation and do some lobbying internally, right? I mean, it's just the whole spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And part of the talent deficit is the people we do have, and this really frustrates me, and I've given some talks on this because it's really a passion of mine. It's like we waste so much time. Like none of us just work 40 hours, right?
Yeah.
But if you just worked 40 hours as a security person, how many of those hours are actually defending your environment? Probably like, I don't know, pick a number, but I think 20 is probably even high, right? It's like 5 or 10. The rest is meetings and all this other stuff, right? And so if we just got more out of the people we have, and I don't blame them, I blame all the logistics and the environment and the corporations and the meetings and all that stuff. If we just got rid of all that, and it's like when you stick someone on that wall, to man that wall, to be on that watch, let them be on that watch, let them do security. Don't make them tinker with their tools and reconfigure Linux and all this other stuff, and make sure, let them do security. And I think, so we definitely need way more people just to basically enlist as cyber soldiers or whatever we want to call them, but we need more out of the people that we have on staff.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yep.
I think this problem you bring up, Ben, is real. I'm one of those that say, yeah, there's probably not enough of us or enough talent out there, and I think it's just going to get worse. And primarily, and here's the reason: it's because of Moore's law, right? So computers are only going to get better and faster, and what used to be, if you're a criminal, you have to be physically present to steal someone's lunch money or whatever. But with the the crime nowadays online, it's like they can be on the other side of the world and take millions, right? And it's only going to get worse as computers get better and as we get more and more connected. The Internet of Things is coming, and it's going to get bad, right? And it's going to get bad quick, because we can see, commodity routers getting hacked 6 ways from Sunday in no time from very low skilled, black hats. And, because computer processing power doubles every 18 months or 2 years, the criminal element is going to take advantage of that as well.
Yep.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yep. So, that was really excellent discussion on that. It's something that we're all passionate about. I know that we see a bunch of people when we go to InfoSec cons, but they just the jobs that are available are not for the people that are necessarily going to InfoSec cons. It's the people who are heads down, blue team defenders, people who just found out about our podcast, ironically enough, or whatever. And those are the jobs that are not glamorous, but they're necessarily the jobs that have to be done, because otherwise, the entire world would just fall apart without those people. So, if you're out there doing the job that nobody necessarily wants to do, thank you for doing so. So, well, we've beat that horse dead. So the second point you came up with was something called deploy and decay. And from the description you've got here, it sounds a lot like a podcast that we did called Moxie versus... what was it called? Moxie versus Mechanisms. That's it.
Yeah. But and actually, we asked Ben that on our podcast, and he said he was on the Moxie side of things, right?
Okay.
I'd rather have a talented individual than a tool, right? If I had my choice between one or the other, right? Ben, you still on that side of the fence?
Yeah, which is funny because I'm a product vendor, right? But so if I can ramble for a second here.
Sure.
So my friend Casey out of Denver said this term, and I'm like, that's it, and it's just this notion of we keep buying tools. And you guys know this. I know this because I go into companies all the time, and they're like, well, we already have this whole shelf of stuff we're not even using, right? But you basically have this tech stack that you've built, and a lot of times it's not built very strategically. It's built each year, not necessarily taking into account the previous year's investments, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like you had this 5-year grand vision of building the St. Louis Arch. It's like all these random pieces, put together. Yeah. And then not just that though, the individual tools themselves, they all need proper care and feeding. They need tuning, right? And sure. So, over time, your environment's changing, you're refreshing laptops, new employees are coming in, new security teams are, teammates are coming in, whatever. And if you're not tuning your detection rules, your prevention rules, your logging, whatever it is, your policies, you're actually getting worse over time, right? So it's kind of like you need the cyber dentist, mentality of you got to keep doing checkups or tuning and that kind of thing. And so, you have all these products that you've spent millions of dollars on, and it's not just a tech problem, right? But part of it is the lack of enough people. You can't focus your time to tune your tools such that they're always operating, not even optimally, but at least good, solid manner. And you just get worse and worse over time. So I'm interested on your guys' take, but I see this all the time across the whole stack, right? I'm not trying to pick on any certain products or anything, but it's just you invest in all this stuff and it just gets worse, and you just get, your threat feeds get more noisy, or you get, this or that, and it's just a huge problem.
Go ahead, Mr. Betcher.
It's really tough to get operational expenses passed in corporations or in the corporate world nowadays. But a capital expense, I mean, it's like, how much do you need a lot of times? So it's much harder to get people than it is for products, because, then you can get that, year over year expenditure covered or whatever. I'm not a finance guy. I have no idea how it works. It doesn't make any sense to me, and it never will probably. But I've noticed that If you want to buy a tool, great, let's do it. We got the audit coming up next, next month, we got to buy something, right? So we can pass the audit. But trying to get a person, it needs to go all the way up to the CEO. Sometimes he's got to sign off on it, and it's crazy. Or if you don't hire somebody in the next 2 weeks, we're going to take that rec away from you. You know what I'm saying? It happens all the time.
So Ben, you were talking about tools in the environment. Do you ever walk into an organization and they say, well, we have this, this, and this, and you're like, well, doesn't A and B kind of do the same things? Why aren't you using them the same way? Or do you ever go in and you've got stuff that has been transitioning from A to B for about the past 3 years and has failed to fully take over and do the job that they paid for the new tool? I mean, how do you go in and help them understand that, they would save a lot more money, they may be able to get a few more head count by getting rid of the old tool if they just transitioned properly, or if they, instead of doubling up on basically the same tool, that they would actually save money in the long run? How do you help an organization do that?
Well, first of all, it sounds like you have real world experience.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Because you're describing pretty much every organization. It's a challenge because, again, right, it's not necessarily like you have this 5-year plan or 10-year plan or even 2-year plan necessarily. It's like, hey, we need detonation now, or we need to refresh endpoint, or we need a proxy, or we need whatever. And so then there's a bake off, and whatever product sort of fits at the time, and pricing and all that other stuff gets put in and doesn't necessarily fit. I think we're starting to see the sort of fatigue, the investment fatigue or the tool fatigue around, not another product, not another pane of glass, not another agent. You keep, pick a part of the technology stack, and there's, not another whatever. Yeah. And so, I think companies are getting it, although, it's completely real that most tools are only providing, I'm just making up numbers here, but I would guess 10 to 50% of the perceived value, right? Like when you go and buy something and then you actually install it, you're only going to get, at least in the real world, right? Today, let's say 10 to 50% of the value. And then there's going to be overlapping features and things like that. And I've seen people buy 3 different detonation engines just for, so they can get multiple opinions about a binary, right? And if you have the money, great, but it doesn't seem like it's necessarily the best way to spend money. And so, it's a lot of it is sort of educating. A lot of it's like, why this versus what we already have. But the other thing is sort of the flip side is, and I was saying this to someone today, I think in general, and please correct me if you guys feel differently, I think in general, people underestimate what their existing stack or existing tools can do, and overestimate the new tool that they're testing or about to purchase or whatever. And maybe that's because of the security industry, marketing and vendor stuff, sexy demos and things like that. But you go in there and you're like, oh, wow, you're doing amazing stuff with crits or whatever, right? Like something like free or simple or whatever. And so it's all around, like, can you actually leverage what you've spent time setting up or purchasing?
At least for me, I see it as a problem with the people that are selling me the product. They really, really want you to have their product, so they're willing to do anything, even badmouth the other vendors. I've had a vendor call me and go, yeah, if you could just tell us who the other POC is that you're working with, we could send you stuff that would show how crappy they are compared to our product. And I'm like, really? Do I want to do that? One, I don't, and I can't. But it's two, it's like, what does that say about your product that you have to be that defensive to do so? I mean, I know that they're trying to get the sale because they want that fat bank from the commission and what have you. But once they get that fat bank and they take your product, you don't get that level of attention from them anymore, because they've got you on the hook for whatever period of time. And then you're stuck with whatever product that may or may not be good, or may or may not work exactly as they said it would, because they wanted to give you the, very pretty, polished version, and what and it works great in other environments, or, and then once you get it into your environment, there's all these little peccadillos that you've got to work out to take time, and there's nobody to really help you, or it takes a support ticket. It takes, so many times to get back. So I really think you have to learn how to kind of take everything that the salespeople do or give you with a grain of salt, and not to oversell it yourself to your management. Whatever worked in your other environment or at your other job may not necessarily work the same in your current environment. So I think you don't want to oversell whatever it is you're trying to get into your organization to your management, and the salespeople are always going to oversell to you. So I mean, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. And, I completely agree with all that. I think there's a couple things that are trending a little bit positive here. The first is that more products are moving to a subscription model, which means that, if you don't like something after a year, you're going to switch it out. So that puts more pressure on the vendors or on the, the provider of the technology, the MSSP, whoever it is. Yep. So that's good. And then more and more vendors are getting into, like I know we are, you guys are, et cetera, getting into more like APIs and stuff like that, just so you can like mold and customize the product, not completely, but at least, have it fit better into your needs, right? Maybe it's what do they say? Square peg in a round hole. Well, maybe you can sort of round off the square peg and shove it in there, right? So I think there's some benefits there too. Yeah. But overall it's tough, and it's really tough to cut through all that. I think it was the 2014 Black Hat keynote by Bruce Schneier, where he talked about the lemon market and how it's really hard to tell if security products are good or not, because security is a hard problem. And if it's failing, well, is it because the people are failing? Is it because the environment's not conducive to good security? Is it because of something else, or is it actually the product, right? And so it's really hard to tell if something's good or not. And then as I'm sure like if you start looking at certain products and look at just one aspect of them, well, all of these products are getting so complicated now and so feature rich that you can't just look at like number of viruses blocked or malware blocked or whatever. You can't, it might be more context rich, or it might be better for integrating with your SIM or what. There's so many different aspects to technology, and so it's really hard to test out the products and know that you're getting the right solution.
Yep.
Well, I think it may come back to Moxie, right? Do you have people on your security team up to the CISO skilled enough to determine whether or not this product fits, or this product is snake oil, or whatever it is, right? Can you speak to that? I mean, have you seen companies purchase something and it's like, why did you even consider this? And then you look at their team and go, oh.
All the time. If you can dream it, I've probably seen it through my travels. But if I can just self-promote for a second, I gave it one of the keynotes at RSA Asia this year. So it was in Singapore. Cool. In July. The video's online on YouTube and all that. It's just a 20-minute sort of TED Talk style. But one of my main points was, instead of building a security tech stack, and then trying to fit people to manage that stack, we need to figure out what our people can do and use technology to either make them more effective and increase their speed, or fill in gaps or whatever, right? Because so often it's like, it's really like they're not even looking at the capabilities of your security team, like your people in the trenches, and saying what tool is best for them. Now there's a little bit of that, but a lot of times it comes down to price or some sort of, checkbox, like a bunch of checkboxes in an RFP. And I get it. It's a complicated process and you don't have tons of time to vet every vendor or every solution. But you need to really take a closer look at what are your people's capabilities? What could they do? What's strong, and how can you increase that strength? And what's weak, and how can you mitigate that weakness internally, versus just picking a few vendors and picking the one that runs best in some test or something, right?
Yep.
Yeah. When you said, you get 10 to 50% of the value of a particular product. How do you bridge the gap? How do you go from 50 to 100%? I mean, what's most effective?
So I wish I had all the answers, but I'll comment. um, I think there's two problems that lead to that, and maybe through looking at the problems, we will think of solutions. The first is that is truly the deploy and decay problem, the tuning problem. Once you set it up and configure it, it's not just like you start using it and never tune it or never reconfigure it, right? And so having more tuning or tools that are better at sort of auto tuning, self-tuning, or at least raising an alarm and saying, hey, you probably want to tune me because I feel like I'm generating too many alerts or something, right? I mean, I feel like our tools should be doing this now. But there's that. And the second thing is sort of like the shiny object. Like you buy something, and by the time you've gone through this crazy procurement process and installed it, now you're on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, you're going to use that tool you just bought, but now it's time for it took so long. Now you're on to next year's project, which is now some totally different part of your stack or whatever. And so it's part of it is also just that you're always kind of looking at some other part of your tech stack, and rather than just taking like 3 or 4 products and really using them to their full extent, I feel like you only need a handful of products or types of solutions with a few good people, and you can do a lot. And yet these companies are having 10, 20, 50 different products. I mean, it's pretty outrageous.
Yeah, I think, and I've seen this at my organization because we hired the guy. You can take a good tool, and with the use of a Python or a Ruby script or 5, you can actually extend make it more extensible and make it more powerful than it would if you bought 3 different systems. So don't underestimate the power of creating your own little scripts, your own little in-house applications to make your tools even more powerful, or to make your fancy new boxes even more powerful. So
yeah, I think I said this last time, but the number one thing I see in like the difference between great teams or good teams and not so good teams is the engineering mindset. If I go into a company and they're applying an engineering mindset, basically meaning like they're looking at these different solutions as just a part of the greater solution, and how do these things talk to each other? The whole field of orchestration and automation have sort of risen out of this type of thinking. But one event fires, how do I automatically check threat feeds and all these other tools I have in my environment to validate that alert or add a reputation score or something like that? But it's not even exactly about what they're doing. It's more around the mindset. Like, are they trying to engineer things? Are they blending open source and commercial? Are they doing this and that? It's just amazing what I've seen teams do with just a few tools, maybe a couple open source threat feeds, and just a few people when they're trying to continually raise their game.
Oh yeah. Just that's that is so true. Yeah. So
now, is it really the single contributors that are more effective, or is it that they have a great manager to bring them together and focus on the right things?
It's a little of both, I think. I think it's both the sort of curiosity and creativity with the ability to spend time on that. So you have the people that are kind of tinkerers or curious about writing a script or something like that, but then also they need that freedom to spend time on that, or that freedom to blend some very expensive tool with some open source crits or threat feed or whatever. I think it's both, but ultimately you need an environment that's willing to let the security team be a little bit of creative and innovative in their approach versus just buying a bunch of stuff and hiring a few people.
Yep, and I think it's the soft skills too that we were talking about talent deficiencies earlier, but it's like you've got somebody who doesn't necessarily know a lot about software development, but you've got a guy who is a fantastic PM who's done security projects. Not every person needs to have the exact mindset for a specific job. Disparate people coming together to create a team can create an even more powerful, group of individuals than just 5 singularly minded infosec personnel. I mean,
it has to have diversity.
That's right. Diversity is key. Yes. So, speaking of diversity, what is this lack of cyber self-esteem? Are you just creating marketing terms on the fly here?
That's what I do when I'm on these long flights.
Right on.
No, so for a long time I've been sort of blogging and just talking about talent deficit and deploying decay, and I like talking about cyber issues that are more thought leadership or more just big picture, less sort of salesy, right? Because I'm a geek at heart, but sure. So I came back from my Asia trip and I had, 26 hours travel coming back or something. And I'm like, man, there's just this, like, people just don't think they can do it. Like they stop before they even try. And so I call it lack of cyber self-esteem. And so what I really mean is, there's certainly like individual self-esteem concerns, and we could maybe do a different segment on sort of personalities within infosec and all that stuff. But what I really mean is just that teams don't think they can really improve their posture. And now there's outliers or there's exceptions to this, but there's so many places I go or friends I have that work in infosec. Most of my friends are just in the field, but it's either the manager, the CISO or the director of information security or whomever doesn't have a whole lot of confidence in his or her team. The team doesn't have a whole lot of confidence in either the CISO or the CEO or the non-CISO leaders, or some sort of mixture or something where just overall the organization doesn't think their security team can do it. But it's just like, guys, you can do it. You talk to them and they're like, oh no, our guys can't do that. We don't have the right people. It's like, no, you do. You're better than teams I've seen that are doing great things. Like, you can do it. You just need that sort of Sesame Street, public announcer, public addresser or whatever it was, like the you can do it kind of thing after school special. And so I'm curious what you guys have seen or feel around that.
Go ahead, Mr. Betcher.
I really think the security team also needs support from other teams within the organization. And that can be as simple as, hey, let's make security part of your review. I mean, I've seen that come into play as well. Like the IT team doesn't have security on their review, so they don't even consider it, right? Their whole idea is uptime. As long as I have 99.59 uptime, I'm doing my job. And if security tries to invade that space, I'm going to push them back at all costs, because that's going to invade my review, right? And if security is put into those goals, right, you don't have to. It's only an investment in policy. You don't have to buy any tools to get everybody thinking about security, right? Would that be an effective way of upgrading security across the organization?
Oh yeah, I think you have to focus on anything that gives you leverage, and really it starts with culture, right? If you can get 1,000 employees all a little bit better, a little bit more vigilant, all a little bit more skeptical of emails or whatever, right? Yeah. That's going to just help everybody. If you can get IT, certainly if you can get IT on your side, I mean, that's the biggest win, really, because if you can get to gold images or proxies that are only whitelisting domains or whatever, you really start to improve by an order of magnitude the number of like alerts or entropy in your security logs and things like that. So you got to try to get IT, but certainly leadership or culture. I think that, and I think part of the problem, and then I'll stop talking for a second because I know I'm talking a lot here. I think part of the problem too is people are more afraid of, and please don't yell at me on Twitter or whatever, or feel free to, whatever. We're all friends here. But I feel like people are more afraid of getting yelled at by coworkers than of getting breached. Right. And so if you're going to take the risk of like, hey, we could be way more secure if we do X, Y, and Z, but these people might yell at me or, whatever, have to change how they do their job. So let's just not do that. But we're going to be way more open to compromise, or at least have way more risk. It's just, on the one hand, I kind of get it, but on the other hand, it's kind of crazy that, it's all about like, we want our coworkers to like us. And so that directly influences how security is done.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to build on a little bit of what Mr. Betcher there was saying. Last week we had our podcast with Josh Corman and Gene Kim on, getting InfoSec and DevOps to playing nicely with one another, because, in my experience, DevOps is all like bang, 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 bang. Let's get out as many deployments as we can. We can't stop for anything, blow through all the barriers, and we're just going to start pushing stuff out immediately. And at organizations, when I was, I've talked to people at CSEC East that I work with, and even my own organization, and security is seen as a barrier to pushing out new hotness and getting new things out. And when you embrace the DevOps thing, the DevOps culture or the DevOps movement, he called it tribes. He called the DevOps tribes. Gene did. And the InfoSec tribe. And he said that sometimes they don't play nice together because one is seen as a threat to the other. And because, you can have all the fancy, pushing out the development and getting everything, but it still has to be done in a manner that is organized, done as securely as possible. You still have compliance requirements that you have to follow, or processes that you have to follow, to get those things done. It's not just, when you're embracing these new cultures or something, that you have to have security integrated in. Like we've had with Martin Fisher, he's like, be a guardrail, not a speed bump. So what you want to do when you're incorporating change, and you're trying to do it with a security bent, because that's what we're trying to sell. We're trying to sell security to the organization. You have to kind of ease into it. You can't just dump it on there, and you can't really be the master of no. You can't just say no, that's not going to work. You just have to be flexible and go, okay, this is the risk you're going to incur by not doing what I propose. If you're cool with that, that's great. But, you may be taking on more risk than the company is willing to take. So I find that, when companies are embracing those kinds of culture changes, some people are hesitant to want to include more than what they want to. Or they'll say, well, okay, we've been doing this for 3 years. We probably need to start thinking about security, which is what I've seen with a lot of startups that I've talked to in the past.
Yeah, no, I think those are all completely valid points. I think, I think you really have to get some quick wins or some low hanging fruit, and then evangelize internally.
Yeah.
I think you need to, certainly try to make security a perk for the culture, the overall organization, where it's not that you're getting some corporate training on security. And I'm sure you guys have had talks on this podcast and everywhere else like 50 times, right? on this topic of like training and, employee training and stuff, but, make it more of a perk where it's like, hey, we're going to tell you how to use two-factor auth and how to secure your home Wi-Fi and how to use Gmail more safely. And you're teaching them all the necessary skills to help their corporate security, but it feels like it's a perk versus some corporate, sexual harassment training or something.
Sure.
So there's that. And then your team still needs this, esteem. You need your team to always be learning, right? The people that are in security are usually the people that are always curious and want to keep learning different topics, different subjects, getting different certifications or whatever. So make sure, and I think both you guys kind of hit on this, make sure there's some training money, make sure there's some room for them to explore. Maybe they hunt, maybe they just, are at times blue team and at times red team or whatever. So really just thinking about, like, especially in this age of not enough people, making sure you're keeping your people happy, and then making sure they feel like they can actually make a difference at their company or at your company. I think that's where we really need to focus.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think you need that person that can talk to other teams and help convince them that what security is trying to do is best for the organization. And yeah, it's easy to be disliked in security because you're a hindrance to productivity. But if you can get somebody to give a presentation to some of the other teams like IT and say, look, here's what could happen if you've got an app vulnerable to SQL injection, and then just demonstrate to them what'll happen. Or here's what happens when I run Mimikatz on your box, right? Your password just comes up in plain text, right? Even though it's like upper lower number special and all as complicated as possible, it's there in clear text. And then start popping some eyeballs, and you might bring people onto your side, and be a good person to them. Be nice, don't be terse or demeaning.
Yep.
Right? Those kinds of things. Have you seen success in those areas? Just having conversations with other teams and saying, look, I'm here to help the overall, not only do I not want to be a hindrance to productivity, but, I want us to be safe and secure, and I want to help you in some, techniques you can take home and protect your family as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the family stuff, it's more usually the wider audience, sort of like the whole organization gets that training, or at least has the option to show up and get that training. I think what is working, and I can't remember which one of you guys used the term earlier of ambassador. I think you were calling me ambassador, but getting those internal ambassadors in different business units to kind of be your inroads into that team, right? So they understand what you're doing. But I think overall the security teams and security in general is kind of shifting into like a business continuity. So it's almost like disaster recovery. Security is kind of more there versus like police or lockdown or something like that, right? With things, especially with things like ransomware and stuff, it kind of woke people up to like, whoa, uptime can be affected by security, right? Which we all have known for years. And there's, crazy DDoSes going on and stuff like that. But yeah, so those conversations are definitely helping, and that awareness internally. And then, yeah, when someone makes a mistake, just not slapping them and really being supportive and saying, oh yeah, that was a real tricky phishing attack. It looks completely real, but here's the one or two things you could see, or, that kind of thing. Like, do you really have a bank account in Panama? No. Well, why did you click this email, kind of thing? Yeah. But trying to really be, I think both you guys touched on this, the soft skills. Like, you have to kind of go to them and say, hey, look, it's okay, you're not in trouble, but like, let's talk about making this a little bit better next time, And so, but yeah, that's really working for people who are emphasizing that in their security programs.
Nice. So you do a regular blog over here on your you do it on Dark Reading, but you also do it on your company's site, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I do a bunch for our company. I do some videos, not every week, but almost every week, just usually a 2 or 3 minute clip that's, I sometimes plug our stuff, but a lot of times I try to just, be like a, security topic or something similar to this. I do Dark Reading, and I'm about to have a regular spot on SC Magazine. So I'm excited about that.
Nice.
So yeah, if I'm not writing code now, at least I get to write text.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. You're being a thought leader. Oh wait, do you want to be a thought leader? I'm not sure if that's yeah. So
Ben, what do the most successful teams have in common?
I mean, I think the first thing is really and I haven't tried to order all these, but really the thing that comes to my mind is that engineering mindset versus like an analyst mindset. So instead of just setting up a system and like waiting for alerts and responding and going through a very systematic process or whatever, it's always trying to improve things, always trying to tinker and get better and tie different parts of your stack together or look at data a different way, so, but the fundamental theme is the engineering mindset. The second thing is having just at least one or two rock stars. And by rock stars, it's people that just have a bias to action, they want to get stuff done. They're versatile. They can look at different parts of the stack, different types of events, whatever they are. And they're curious. And guess what? A lot of these people are not like CS majors. They're not software engineers. When I talk to people, kind of this lack of cyber self-esteem, and they're like, oh, well, I'm not a software engineer, or I didn't get a CS degree, so I can't write Python or something, right? It's like, no, you can. Some of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley, the cool, security guys that I've met, they have like business degrees or bio degrees or, some other degree that's not CS, right? And so part of it is just the attitude or the curiosity. But then also like, I think you guys mentioned it too. It's not earth shattering. It's just having more support outside of security. So IT is not an enemy. They're an ally.
Yeah.
The C-levels are not enemies, they're allies, right? That kind of thing. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? But I think a lot of it is the bias to action, the ability to kind of experiment or innovate, and then not being afraid to swap things out or try different things, and if it works, then push harder in that direction, and then finding that delicate balance between sort of monitoring and able to detect and respond, or able to clean up quickly, or whatever it is, whatever kind of tools or process you're using, with still letting people get their work done. And so maybe you can lock things down completely, or only let certain domains, or even cut off internet access, or whatever it is. But finding that right balance, and knowing that balance is not uniform across the environment. You got to have pockets that are very locked down and pockets that are very open. And I think companies that are a little bit more flexible in that way are having a lot more success.
I like that, Ben. Your number 2 there was, find that security evangelist, find someone who's been through Dante's Inferno, right? And come out, and he is like wholly experienced in this. And, he really knows his stuff, and he is like an expert at security. Whatever the cost is, get that guy on your team, and then you'll have people follow that person, right?
Yep.
You'll have the sysadmins want to follow that guy, because when they have a conversation with him, he is that rock star. He does know what he's talking about. He has the knowledge and experience necessary to get that team and that company into a better secure position.
And I've spent a lot of years as really a full-time coder, which was usually involved in security in some way or another. But I was writing a lot of code, and there's always been a saying, and different people have different statistics, but the saying was kind of like, a great programmer is worth 10 good programmers, or some people might even say 100, or some people say 24 or whatever, but it's a pretty significant difference. And if you can, and I feel like security is the same way, where one great person can do the work of 5 or 10 or whatever it is, good or mediocre people. And it's not necessarily the work in the volume, but just in the overall like value they bring to the organization. And guess what? You're not going to have to pay them 5x or 10x. Maybe you pay them 2x, and maybe it's kind of a hit to your budget there, but it's worth it, right? Mm-hmm. You get one awesome dude, one awesome guy or girl or whatever it is, and a few, good people, and you're going to have a great program, or at least you're going to be on the way to having a great program. So yeah, I definitely think if you can get a high quality person, even if they cost a lot more, it's worth it.
Yep. Wow. Gentlemen, look at the time. We are well above our hour window.
Man, I feel like we just got started.
I know, right? But I always like talking about stuff like this, because this is, it's not overly technical, but it's still stuff that we as InfoSec people, and not even InfoSec people, managers, devs, this is just stuff that affects everybody at every level at some point in their careers. And people may be living through this right now, so it's always good to have, senior leadership like Ben coming on the show here to, who's been there and has seen it and has lived through it, and help others, solve the problems, and help try to find solutions where they can. So Ben, we appreciate you coming on and talking about this.
Yeah, thanks. I'd love to hear from you guys some more, and anyone listening. I'm at Chicago Ben. I'd love to have some discussion around this because I'm sure the listeners, you guys have lots of ideas and probably better solutions than I've just talked about. But
Yep.
yeah, thanks guys. This was great.
Yeah, feel free to hit up if you want to continue the conversation. Include at Chicago Ben and with the hashtag BreakSec or at BreakSec. You can always add that. Mr. Betcher, how would people want to get a hold of you if they wanted to continue this conversation with you as well?
Follow me on Twitter. I'm at BetcherPwned, BoettcherPwned.
Right on. You can, of course, the official BreakSec podcast is at BreakSec, BRAKESEC. You can follow me personally. I'm at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We had a lot of good feedback about last week's DevOps InfoSec podcast. We enjoy the feedback. We read the feed. Well, we meaning me, Mr. Betcher. I'm his secretary, so I handle all the light work with the email and stuff. But yeah, we enjoyed all the feedback from that. And if you you like this show and you wanted to send us some feedback, you can hit us up on our email is bds.podcast@gmail.com. We're on SoundCloud. We're on iTunes, even though iTunes appears to be taking its sweet time populating episodes. You can find us on SoundCloud, RSS feeds. We have an RSS feed. Website is www.breakingsecurity.com. That's BRAKEING security.com. We're on the TuneIn Radio app. We're on Stitcher. Player.fm. We're on the Google Play Store. There's pretty much nowhere you cannot find us. So you would have to be trying really hard to not listen to this show if you wanted to. We're on Patreon. Thank you to all of our Patreon members and our iTunes feedback people. Thank you. You added we're up to I think 20 or 25 now on the feedback. So that was very helpful. Before we go, Ben, are you going to be speaking anywhere? I know you said you did, RSA Asia and Singapore a couple of months ago. Where are you going to be the rest of the year?
Yeah, I actually don't know. I've been working on a lot of internal projects right now. I know I'll be in DC in a couple weeks and probably be a few other places, maybe West Coast as well. But honestly, I'm not quite sure yet.
Okay, right on. All right. Well, I'm sure you'll tweet it out or something. People can follow you on Twitter and find out where you're going to be. So, if you make it up to Seattle, let me know. B-Sides is coming up. HushCon's in December, so tickets are on sale for HushCon. If you know how to get HushCon tickets, you don't need to know that it's coming up because you're already on the mailing list. So I hope I had a good time at Source Seattle. I'll be there on this is Monday, so actually the 12th and the 13th. I hope I enjoyed that. If you were there, I hope you had a good time seeing me. So, Mr. Betcher, I guess we'll see you next week. You're going to be back again next week?
Oh, yeah.
You're going to make this a more permanent thing now instead of doing all this paid time off? Yeah. We're going to have to revisit the PTO stuff, I think. So, no, I'm just kidding. So, well, anyway, that was it for this week's Breaking Down Security. You have a great week, and we will talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
And we're clear. Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Ben, for coming on. It's always great to. I never, if we do a technical podcast, that's great. But if I think the manager stuff, I think these are the kinds of soft skills that a lot of the people in rank and file or down in the trenches like us really need to know and understand.
Yeah, I mean, the tech blogs and the. Like when you go to a conference and stuff and it's like a new exploit or a new vuln or whatever. I mean, those are obviously sexy talks and stuff, but it's sort of navigating your career or figuring out how to get your team better or whatever. That's kind of the most important thing, right? And no, this was great. Thanks guys for having me.
And the O-Day stuff, when they talk about that stuff at InfoSec cons, that's a small point in time.
Yep.
You know, like Miss Snoke, we got to get Nancy Snoke on to talk about changing security cultures, and stuff, and get her point of view on it. But those things can span years, and she had a 30-minute stable talk on something that could span your entire career. Stuff you can learn from. Whereas an O-Day is only an O-Day for this point of your career, or even less, So I've actually started advocating that people maybe get PM certifications and stuff, because learning how to manage resources and manage people and understand the interactions between people, because us InfoSec people, we're not extroverts by nature. So being armed with things like PM skills and understanding how to interact properly with people is I think a soft skill that we should work on as an industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey Ben, do you listen to audiobooks?
Yes.
Do you have an Audible account?
Yes.
All right. Have you read the book Future Crimes?
No, I haven't.
Future Crimes.
I will send that to you. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
It'll be my gift to you. Thank you for coming on the podcast. This was awesome, dude.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I definitely want to meet up when if I'm in Seattle or if I'm in Austin. I'll definitely let you guys know.
Right on.
All right, sweet.
Doesn't Carbon Black have an office?
Doesn't
Carbon Black have an Austin office?
We have some developers in San Antonio, so sort of.
Okay.
Yeah.
But don't go down there much.
Yeah, I can imagine so.